go ahead and move on towards your workshop. Let's see. A couple thoughts about that. One is that, you know, as you guys know, the reason, sort of the whole point of doing a research paper was to move towards your workshop, right? To be able to ultimately put on a great workshop and to learn a lot about a topic by conducting a literature review in that particular area. But having said that, now that your papers are behind you, I don't want those individual research papers to get in the way of a good workshop. And sort of what I mean by that is that I don't want you guys to feel too wedded to your research papers. You know, so if you decide that your workshop, you know, I think it would be a mistake in some cases to feel like you have to use everybody's research paper in your workshop. Is basically what I'm trying to say, right? It could be sort of an awkward presentation to feel like we've got to, you know, include, you know, little bits from 4 or 5 different papers. If you want to use that approach, that's fine. I'm not saying that you can't or that you shouldn't necessarily, but I'm saying, you know, your goal now is to figure out how can we deliver, you know, the most effective workshop in the hour that we've got, and that might involve taking pieces from everybody's research paper. It might involve focusing in on one or two of the papers. It might mean using none of the papers. You know, you might have found some awesome activity or whatever that you can base your workshop around, and your individual research papers just basically kind of fall into the background. They become, you know, knowledge that you guys bring with you to be able to produce a better workshop, maybe to do a great job of answering questions at the end of the workshop, but they're really not going to be necessarily part of, you know, of whatever presentation you might be making. So just please, you know, shift onward and try to, you know, do what you can between now and then to produce a great workshop. That to me is the best part of the course. You know, when I kind of turn things over to you guys, I kind of sit in the audience, I become part of the audience and watch what you guys come up with. But it's only as good as you make it, right? So please just try to take this seriously and create a great workshop, and hopefully we'll get a, you know, a nice set of 5 workshops to conclude the course. By the way, we only, I think 3 teams have not yet picked a date. So let me just remind you that I've got Team D is doing their workshop on the 19th, so they'll be doing it before Thanksgiving break. That's coming up. It's in about a month. And Team B, like Bravo, has reserved the 8th of December, but that's it. I haven't heard from the other teams. So there's December 1st, 3rd, and 10th. Still left for the teams I haven't heard from. So I'm not worried if you're not worried, but you might want to nail that down sometime soon. Okay. What else? Research paper feedback. As I hopefully have communicated somewhere along the way, I would like not only, of course, for your research paper to come in to me, but to also be shared with your team members. So if you haven't already, and if you haven't already, it's okay. But sometime in the very near future, please get your teammates a copy. Electronic or paper, it doesn't matter to me. But your team members should be reading your paper and providing feedback on it. And that's the handout for today, is a form for you guys to provide research paper feedback to your team members. I'm only handing you 1 copy of this form, although it should be reproduced, you know, 3, 4, 5 times, whatever, for your team members. The reason I'm only giving you 1 copy is just because I think most people are going to want to do it electronically. If you want to do paper copies, that's fine. But I can easily reproduce it on my website, or what most people have done in the past is, you know, it's just basically, you know, take the major headings from this form and just reproduce it yourself. It'll only take you a few minutes. As you can see, there are only 3 categories I'm asking you, well, I guess 4 categories sort of, where I'm asking you for feedback. The first is the content of the paper. If you take a look at the handout that I just gave you, there is a description of the content part of the paper which matches the content description I've given you guys so long ago when I gave you the original assignment. You know, basically, you know, commenting on the paper's content. The second category, I don't have this in front of me, is something like, what is it, writing quality? Thank you. You guys know what writing quality looks like. There's again the description from the original handout. Thank you. So if you want to just, you know, electronically, just, you know, category 1 content, you don't have to reproduce all the criteria. You know, category 2 writing quality, get some feedback there. And then category 3 is just the evaluator's overall content. Right? So whatever you didn't put into content or writing quality would go there, just sort of overall strengths and weaknesses. Those are the first 3 things you do. The 4th thing you do is to just provide a number. And as you can see here, I'm asking you to try to put the paper into one of these 4 categories. If it really doesn't fit, you have to give a 1.5 or, you know, whatever, that's fine. But if you can, try to use these categories. I'm asking you to give a number 1 to what you think to be the best paper in the group, other than your own, right? We all know that your paper is the best. So I'm not asking you to rate yourself. It's of the other papers, right? Which one did you think was the best? Please give it number 2 to the one that you think is still a good top paper, even if it's not the best one that you thought. Number 3, a 3 would be given to a paper that you believe is at least acceptable of graduate level work, in your opinion. And then a 4 would be given to a paper that, for whatever reason, you believe to not be reflective of graduate level work. So those are the 4 things that you do for feedback for your team members. Again, content, writing quality, overall comments, and then a number. Please make sure that everybody hears me clearly on this. You should be copying your team members. A copy of your feedback comes to me, and a copy goes to your team member, except for the number. I do not want your team members to know the number that you're giving. All right? The number only comes to me. Okay? Your team members get everything else, just not the number. Question?
Yeah, so we don't actually have to rate them. We could give out 4 1s, right? If we felt like if it was that level.
Good.
Okay.
Yep. Questions?
Oh, but it doesn't.
Yeah. I don't want to make this just frighteningly unreasonable, but I'd like to get done fairly soon. What if we said, a week would be, next Tuesday? What if we said, maybe 2 weeks? What if we said, 2 weeks from today? Does that seem okay? I mean, get it done sooner if you can, but I know you guys are busy. I don't want to make this too much of a burden. So 2 weeks from today, I'd like this to be done. All right? Again, a copy to your teammate, a copy to me, but not the number. The number does not go to your teammate. All right? And one other thing I want to make sure that I'm being clear about here, and that is to point out that this is, kind of a sensitive, difficult thing, to be giving your team members feedback, right? Your team members, of course, are people that you're working with in other classes. They're folks that you want to make sure that you are, not, I don't know. You want to make sure, of course, that you're using the good feedback skills that we've been discussing, to try to give good, constructive feedback to your team members. I think it's important, though, for you guys to realize that I am not going to use anybody's feedback to downgrade anybody. All right, and that's kind of what I'm driving at here in terms of, the difficulty of, providing reviews of your teammates' papers. Again, I'm not going to use your feedback to downgrade anybody. I would only use it to raise grades, actually, in certain cases. Okay? So I want your opinion of your team members' papers. Now, having said that, please no conspiracies. I heard Jennifer's comment, and it's fine if you really believe that everyone deserves a 1. But I'd like this to be, your good, honest, professional opinion. So please don't all get together and say, hey, if we all give each other, number 1s, then it'll put pressure on Dr. Butterfield to raise our grades. Please don't do that. I'd like your honest, professional opinion, of your team members' papers. And because, I'm the only one seeing the numbers, hopefully that will help. I'm not going to share that with anybody. Absolutely confidential. Okay? So the feedback can be constructive, positive, right? Number comes to me to help you get a sense of, kind of your honest opinion of your team members' paper, which I will not use to downgrade anybody. Okay? I hope that I'm being clear. Hopefully that makes it a little bit less of a difficult thing to give your team members feedback. Yes.
Yes, when we are giving feedback, we do it electronically.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Right. As a general rule, I always like paper copies of things. This is an exception. It's fine to give me electronic copies of this. Okay. So your feedback can be given to me electronically. This is about the only time I would look for this. But thank you for asking. You can save some paper. Electronic submission is fine. Okay. Very good. Any other questions? Hopefully this is relatively straightforward. If nothing else, it gets you reading your team members' papers, right? You should be doing it. All right. I think we're okay with moving forward toward workshops. We're okay with feedback on the research papers. No class Thursday. Right? I'll be out of town, so I won't be able to hold class. So I'll be seeing you guys next Tuesday. Our plan for today is to cover the slides on conflict, which we did not get to last time. So hopefully everybody still has the handout on conflict and conflict handling. And unless you guys have any questions, we can get started. Anything else in your mind? it's just relief. You're done with your research? Okay. All right. Well, I don't have extra copies of these slides, so again, hopefully everybody got them last time. I didn't pick up the extra copies, so they probably got thrown out. So my apologies for not having extra. These were handed out last time. Okay. I think your chapter does a pretty good job of covering a lot of conflict material. So this is just a little bit of extra information, some of which is actually just reviewing what your book does say, just to make sure that we're clear on certain points. Let's go ahead and get started. Conflict refers to any situation in which there are incompatible goals, thoughts, or emotions within or between individuals or groups that leads to opposition. It's kind of a wordy definition, but I think it's all pretty important to having a full sense of what conflict is all about. One thing I guess I do want to mention about this definition, though, is that it's a pretty broad one. It involves lots of situations, right? Really any situation where you have something incompatible going on between people. So, a conflict can be as, dramatic and ugly, as two people screaming at each other, getting into a fight over something. But it can also be as kind of mundane as, I like Coke, you like Pepsi. That's kind of a silly example, but that does conform to the definition. It's basically an incompatible thought. I'm saying I like one thing, you're saying you like something different. That's a conflict. And one reason why we use such a broad definition, that really encompasses all these sorts of things. We'll talk about it in a moment, but it has to do with the idea that conflict is not inherently a bad thing, which was one of your discussion questions for today. Right? Conflict is not inherently bad by any stretch. In fact, conflict can be a very positive force, a very useful force inside organizations. And to get at that notion of the positive side of conflict, you need to have a relatively broad definition. Let me also note the second point on the slide, which is the concept of conflict means caring. This is one of the times in this class, one of the relatively few times when we kind of explicitly need to take emotion into account. A lot of times in a business school class, we keep things relatively dry, and emotion-free. But really, you can't do that, I think, in order to be able to handle conflict effectively. Basically, people wouldn't engage in conflict if they didn't at some level care about what was at stake, right? People wouldn't be screaming at each other over abortion if they didn't care about the issue at some level. People wouldn't be even arguing Coke versus Pepsi if they didn't at some level care about the fact that, Coke is better than Pepsi or Pepsi is better than Coke or whatever. So people engage in conflict because they care about the issue, at least at some level. And so if you want to be a manager who's effective at dealing with conflict, you're going to have to be able to take the emotional aspect of conflict into account. And we'll get to that somewhat more when we talk about, ways to get better at resolving conflict later on in the class. The conflict implies caring, it implies emotion. You can't just, ignore emotion to be good at handling conflict. Conflict is a negative force. There's nothing surprising here. We can all, easily relate to the concept of conflict as a negative, destructive force. We typically talk about that as being when conflict is not being resolved effectively. But of course, conflict can be a negative force in other ways, like as your book talks about, conflict at times can be personal, right? There's the personal aspect of conflict, where people are criticizing each other, for traits and characteristics, and the conversation gets very personal and ugly. That's another element of conflict as a negative force. But more generally, we're talking about conflict as being a negative force broadly and across an organization. When systems are not set up adequately, when managers are not trained adequately, to be able to resolve conflict in what we might refer to as a healthy manner. When that happens, it drains energy and resources, it leads to more tense relationships, a more stressful work climate, and tends to drag down communication across the workplace, and lead to a more competitive, even political kind of environment. Again, that's pretty familiar to us, but the research is pretty clear about how conflict can be a negative force. What's maybe a little bit less intuitive, at least for some of us, is conflict is a positive force. Hopefully most everybody by now has filled out that the survey in your book that measures your conflict handling style. You did the discussion questions for today, you filled that survey out at least. Hopefully you're walking in here with some kind of sense of what your conflict handling style looks like. If you test it out as being an avoider, you're probably somebody who would view this kind of slide with interest. Because one of the major reasons why someone does avoid, at least one of their dominant styles, is the idea that it's sort of an assumption that an avoider often makes that conflict is inherently a bad thing, to be avoided, to be walked away from. So if you are an avoider, you might say, well, conflict being positive force. Well, it certainly can be. And especially if you're somebody who tests out more, for example, being a collaborator. You're somebody who I'm sure gets this idea that conflict as a positive force tends to happen when you've got the first line, which is an airing of concerns. If you've set up the kind of environment in your work organization where people feel comfortable, being able to express divergent opinions, being able to play the devil's advocate. I bet you guys have probably seen both sides of that in your organization. You've probably seen some organizations where people do feel relatively free, to express divergent opinions, to give a different idea. But I bet you've seen the other side of it, right? It's kind of like that groupthink organization that we hinted at earlier in class, where maybe there's a strong dominant leader, that makes people feel kind of uncomfortable and doesn't make them feel not able or willing to be able to give some kind of different view. That's not a good thing, right? That would be conflict, as more of a negative force, so people don't feel like they can hear those concerns. And so that's kind of what you're gunning for, right? As a manager, to try to use conflict to your advantage, to try to create the kind of environment where people do feel like they can express different things. When that happens, all kinds of other good stuff happens. You tend to have more constructive problem solving in that kind of environment, improved relationships, and overall improved work climate within the company. Greater innovation and change, of course, that's a crucial one. So many companies today rely on innovation, the ability to manage change to be effective, and organizations that deal with conflict in a good, healthy, positive manner tend to be more innovative and able to change effectively. In fact, there are some organizations like 3M, who are, of course, major innovators, who intentionally try to stir up conflict. Not the negative side of conflict, but the positive side, right? To get people to give those different views. Helps them be more innovative. Group cohesiveness, another positive benefit shown in the literature in this area, and ultimately increased productivity. One of those major things, again, we're shooting for as managers. Right? So all kinds of elements that bring out this concept of conflict as a positive force. All right. Which brings us to the topic of those individual differences. Those conflict hammering styles. Right? So here you've got a chart, which I believe is in your book, showing the various interpersonal conflict hammering styles. And because your book does talk about this, I don't want to go into this in much detail. But I do want to say a few things, but I think your book doesn't necessarily get into a whole lot. So let's just spend at least a few minutes on this chart. As you can see, if you haven't had a chance to read the chapter yet, we can very usefully think about two dimensions here in terms of how people handle conflict. The first dimension is when you engage in conflict, to what degree do you look out for yourself, for your own needs and interests? Right? If you look out for your own needs and interests to a great degree, we call you assertive. If you really don't look out for yourself, we call you unassertive. The other dimension is a concern for others. All right? Again, when you engage in conflict, to what degree do you look out for the other person with whom you're engaging in conflict? If you look out for that person to a great degree, we call you cooperative. If you really don't, we call you uncooperative. And you put those two dimensions together and you end up with 5 different interpersonal conflict handling styles. All right? And hopefully you've located yourself. Maybe you can locate your team members. Maybe your team's talked about this a little bit. It might be a decent conversation to have. At some point, you have to get a sense for the different conflict handling styles within your team, some of the strengths and weaknesses, and warning signs depending on people's different conflict handling styles. It can be a very important explanatory factor in helping us understand whether a team's going to work well together or ultimately not work well together. Let's talk about that some. We'll begin down here with avoiding. Right? We talked about this a little bit with the Bob Knowlton case. Arguably Bob Knowlton, something of an avoider, someone who really doesn't look out for himself or others. The avoiding style. There are some advantages and disadvantages to avoiding. Right? One of the big advantages is kind of diffusing tension. It's one of the major reasons why avoiders will avoid is that they don't like the negative feelings that tend to arise when conflict bubbles up. And so, keeping those negative feelings out of it is one of the benefits. But the downsides are significant. Right? The downsides of avoiding are significant enough that researchers who've done so much work in this area tend to view, quite clearly view avoiding as a lose-lose approach to conflict, right? Meaning, I lose. If I'm the big avoider, I lose because of my behavior, and everyone else loses, right? The other party loses because of my behavior also. What are some of those downsides of avoiding? Why is it such a lose-lose prospect?
The conflict tends to continue if you don't do anything about it.
Yeah, the problem doesn't go away, right? I mean, you might get lucky, it could go away, but chances are it's not going to go away. You're at least not doing anything to help it go away, so the conflict remains. Okay, right? I think that worked in your favor. Good. That's another good one. Yeah. You guys can think of others, but significant downsides, right? Everybody loses typically when conflict is not resolved. It's referred to as a lose-lose approach. So in general, if you did test out as being an avoider, or if it is one of your sometimes your tie or they're very close, these kinds of skills. If it's one of your major styles, just please be aware of the lose-lose aspect of it. But in general, it's not a very good way to handle conflict. Having said that, though, there are times when avoiding is a good idea. And why don't we go ahead and just throw out some of those times. When is it a good idea to avoid? Okay, yeah, when you need to cool things down a little bit, at least avoid temporarily. A good idea. Highly volatile situation, as you said. Good. When else might it be a good idea to avoid? Okay, yeah. You just sort of a no-win kind of situation. Maybe it's worth avoiding. Time's better spent in some other endeavor, right? No one has any hope of winning, or a hopeless kind of situation. Maybe some avoiding makes sense. Others?
Let's say kind of along those lines, maybe when the ends don't justify the means.
Okay. All right. Good. Yep. Similar kind of thinking, but good. Yep. Any others? This is good. Times when a relationship's unimportant to you. This happens in business. You're not an international company. You're on the phone with somebody trying to sell you something from overseas. You're getting into a shouting match because you're not interested in that product. Why not just walk away? No point in engaging in that conflict if the relationship is unimportant. So anyway, you guys get the idea. Generally a lose-lose prospect, but there are times when we need to do it, or we need to avoid it. So that's something you'll kind of hear us talk about as we walk through these styles, is that it's important to be able to use each of these styles at least sometimes. Right? That we shouldn't abandon any of them, even if they are generally lose-lose kinds of prospects. So, at times, it's important to be able to avoid. Let's move down here. We'll go to accommodating next. Of course, this is the case where you're looking out for the other party's needs and interests significantly, but you're really not looking out for your own needs and interests. If you are not an accommodator yourself, you may know somebody who is. Probably all think of examples there. Same thing with avoiding. There are some strengths and weaknesses. Some of the advantages of accommodating, again, kind of diffusing tension. That's another major reason why people accommodate. Conflict begins to bubble up, negative feelings are starting to emerge. So we say, okay, fine, I'll just give in. I'll let you have your way. I'm not going to deal with it. You give you your way. And in that sense, it's actually a lot like avoiding. Except we're in avoiding, you're not really doing anything. And accommodating, you're actually actively giving into the other person and letting them have their way explicitly. But the motivation is typically quite similar, right? Just trying to diffuse negative feelings. Diffusion of negative feelings is an advantage. Another one is you can build social credits sometimes by accommodating. We kind of hinted at this in the previous class. I think in the politics class where you might do something, if there's some issue that doesn't really matter to you, you might say, okay, I'll give in today and let you have your way in the hope, or maybe, with the implication that maybe you'll give it to me in the future. It's something that I care more about that's less important to you. That's that concept of building social credits through accommodating. So there are some advantages. The disadvantages, though, once again, are significant to the point where you might expect accommodating to be a lose-win, right? I lose and you win because I'm accommodating. Once again, the research in this area is quite dramatic in suggesting that accommodating is not a lose-win strategy. It's another lose-lose strategy. And that's worth spending a minute on, I think, because that may not be intuitive. Again, it's like, okay, I can see why the accommodator loses because they're not getting their way. But why does the other party lose also, at least over the long term? And let me maybe get some thoughts from you guys. Why is that? Why is it a losing prospect for the other party as well? Okay, yeah, lack of a better metaphor, but yeah. Can you maybe pursue that a little bit?
Where.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the meeting. Then that is putting the baby metaphor.
Yeah.
Mitch?
Sorry, I guess I don't know how to spell
Brett?
these very well.
Putting baby.
Yeah, no.
Oh, you mediation. You used to have done that, right?
I thought that was kind of more like a compromise to say that this.
Well, I did a comedy too, you know, behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're on the road to a good one, so I want to kind of move forward, but then you can pursue that one if it begins to gel a little bit. Other thoughts? Why is it, a losing approach for both people when someone accommodates? I mean, if you can't think of it immediately, think of someone that you've known who's an accommodator. They're always giving in. How does that end up harming everybody? Is that a
I know we were saying that obviously it's different, always accommodate individuals. But I mean, models is kind of way different.
Okay, all right, so a lack of growth, a lack of development. Another way of putting that, I think, is like in a group context, would be a lack of input, right? No one is benefiting if someone is consistently giving in to everybody else because you don't get the benefit of that person's input, right? You don't get the benefit of their ideas, and none of us grow in development because we're not getting adequate input from somebody.
I would say, well, I've worked on a lot of events before, and I wanted to do things a certain way that I have learned that, this period is a lot of knowledge, but my boss is stingy and won't let me work outside of what he thinks.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what can he do? So I just didn't press it, and we lost out probably on quite a bit of fundraising money. So I mean, by not pushing the envelope.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, when you're in a subordinate position, often there's only so much you can do, right? But then you try and not just accommodate. Oh, yeah, I think that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. It's comfort that when you're always on the right, you're always giving in.
Always giving in.
And you're always saying, okay, fuck this. I'll give up, what I just want to do. I'll give up, half. Instead of saying, no, I'm going to decide to say, this is, I'm going to stand my ground here.
Yeah.
This is right, what you're saying. But Jen was saying, the path that I'm, could go on this.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I kind of thought that's where you were heading. Very good. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other reasons why accommodating is a losing prospect for both parties? Are all good answers? Anything else? Another one, just to throw it out there, the literature often focuses on, but it may not resonate with you guys so much. It's sort of the idea of making a person feel guilty. Kind of the implication of being in a relationship with someone like that, whether it's a personal or a professional relationship, what that can sort of do to your own identity, what it can make you do to your sense of self. If you're always getting your own way, and the other person is never getting their way. And again, I know not all of us, relate to that, but I see some nodding heads suggesting that can actually have a destructive effect on someone who's always getting their way, and it makes them feel bad about themselves. Why am I always getting my way, and this person is getting nothing out of this? I mean, it can sort of give you damage your sense of self, at least potentially. Another issue brought out of the literature. So, for all these reasons, and maybe others you can think of, very much a losing prospect for both parties. Go ahead.
I was just going to think of, an example like in a marriage, for example, and the husband's always saying, yes, dude, everything with his wife, or ask. I know at least with my wife, after a while, she would probably start questioning my sincerity. So it would never create problems as well.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that you find in marriage counseling. People talk about it. It's not a good idea to just give in. You might feel like you should. It's like, okay, I'm in a marriage now. I should just keep giving. It's a very unhealthy dynamic. If someone's consistently just giving in, it can lead to contempt, feelings of contempt later on with the accommodator. It's basically the accommodator's own fault. later on says, sort of blows up and says, I never get my way around here. It's like, well, okay, yeah, because you've been accommodating. So all kinds of negative dynamics can occur when someone's accommodating free. So very good. So all part of the picture in terms of why accommodating is a lose-lose prospect. And so again, if this is your dominant conflict handling style, it's once again worth taking a moment to re-examine that and say, maybe I need to make a change here and not, be an accommodator. But having said that, like avoiding, there are times when it makes sense to accommodate. And what are some of those? When do you want to be accommodated?
When you know that the other team member is right.
Okay. That's good. I mean, it's never happened. It's never happened to most of us. But when it happens, that you decide that you're wrong, the other person is right. At the time, to just give in, accommodate. Yeah.
I think if the other person's really passionate about it and your relationship with them could be threatened, then it's better to accommodate than to fight it.
Very important one. When sort of harmony is the most important issue, right? We're all competitive MBA students, and so for at least some of us, it's like, winning is always important. Well, I'm not going to debate you on that, but at least arguably there are times when harmony is more important than winning in a conflict. Marriage is probably a good example of that as anything. Sometimes the relationship is most important, and some accommodating can be a good idea if that's the paramount concern. Is another hand this way?
I guess the same thing. Just like whenever there's a group consensus, like it's sometimes better to just go with the group rather than create tension.
Yeah, right, okay. So Kennedy, again, understanding that sometimes, again, the group is being robbed of valuable input, kind of like Jennifer was describing, but sure, at times, going with the flow, as you're saying, can be the right call. Yeah. Okay, making deals, what do you think?
I agree. Knowing that there's something that you're going to want to stand your ground on coming around the
Oh, great, yeah. So getting back to the social credit concept, right? Sometimes when you need social credit, so when you want to build social credits, some strategic accommodating can be a very good approach, right? I'll give them to do it this time, better give it to me later when it matters more to me. Yeah.
Accommodating is very good, and then they try to set up for
Okay.
it happens more often than you like it to. Yeah. So I think that's very good. Trying to get out, trying to get people.
Yeah, we talked about political strategies, right? Ways of trying to obtain power. We mentioned ingratiation as one of those categories. And yeah, very similar kind of concept here. So good, right? So again, just like avoiding, we're saying yes, if it's your dominant style, please rethink it because it's a lose-lose approach, generally speaking. However, like avoiding, there are times when we want to accommodate, and we shouldn't, and getting back to the baby metaphor, right? We shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. It's important to be able to accommodate at times, right? And not totally just discard that style. Moving up here to forcing and competing, but which actually goes under even different names. Those are just some of the major names, forcing and competing. Does your book use an even different term? There are lots of different terms for these things, but maybe your book uses forcing or competing. Point being, though, this is the case where you're looking out for yourself, your own needs and interests, but really not looking out for the other party's needs and interests. Advantages here certainly is the big one is that you get your way, right? You get what you want. But the disadvantages, once again, are significant. Not so much so that we call it a lose-lose approach or anything like that. In general, forcing or competing is referred to as a win-lose approach, right? I win, you lose because of my forcing style or competing style. But the downsides are there. The major downside, not surprisingly, is hard feelings on the part of the other person, right? That you're engaged in a conflict with, but you're not looking out for their needs or interests at all, or at least very little, to the point where you win and they lose. For that reason, just please be aware that if you are a forcing and competing can be devastating inside a group atmosphere. So just please be aware of that issue. If you do test out as being a forcer, or if you know yourself to be a forcer, it can have a very tough effect on team members. If you're always pushing your own ideas, looking for your own needs and interests, not adequately taking other people's ideas, needs, interests into account. Very important issue that when you're in a group environment, forcing is generally not the best approach. Trying to look out for your own needs and interests is fine, but also take other people's needs and interests into account is a better idea. More out here. But again, having said that, there are times when forcing can be appropriate, even in a group context. what are some examples of when it makes sense, when it's the right call to enforce? Okay, good. That's a good one. Sometimes under time constraints, you have no choice but to say, look, I've got the power, I'm pretty sure that I'm right. We're under time pressure. We're going to do things my way. Yeah.
Ethical issues that go from there.
Okay, certainly can play a part here and some forcing behavior. Okay, good. Others? Stalemates? Yeah, again, you've got the power to break the stalemate. Sometimes you're not getting anywhere, you're not able to move forward. You need to go your way. And again, some of that can be done, like we talked about with accommodating and social credits. You can just say, yeah, we're going to do things my way this time, but, I'll do my best, or I'll pledge to, do things your way some other time. But this time, we're going with what I'm pretty sure is the right call. So yes, there are times very much when using a forcing style can be appropriate, even in a group atmosphere. Just please be aware, again, if you're an enforcer, if your dominant style, be aware of the likelihood that hard feelings are causing problems inside your team, and that you can try to temper that style as much as you can and shift more toward this kind of style. The compromising style is also referred to as a win-lose approach. It's a different kind of win-lose approach, though, right? Forcing is win-lose in the sense that I win and you lose if I'm a forcer. Compromising is win-lose in the sense that both parties win and both parties lose simultaneously, right? That's the nature of the compromise. We just kind of split things down the middle. I get something if I don't get everything, right? You get something, but you don't get everything. We both win and we both lose all at the same time. That's basically, again, the advantages and disadvantages, right? Everybody gets something with the advantage. The big disadvantage is that nobody gets everything. Right? They'll have to give something as well. What are some times when it's appropriate, maybe particularly appropriate to be compromising? When do you do this kind? When people want to get their things both sides have strong concerns, relatively equal power, right? You just say, let's put things down the middle. Right? Good? Okay. Other thoughts? And there are norms to compromise, right? When you're negotiating, for your salary, buying a car, right? Not always the case that that's going to be the norm, but often the case there's some expected, give and take back and forth. That ultimately may lead to a compromise sort of solution. Under time pressure, right? When there is probably so often see compromising done in business, right? There's just not time maybe to always come up with a fully collaborative solution. So we'll just, for the sake of expediency, just cut things down the middle and move on. With a hand. Yeah. There you go. Speedy and efficient. All right. And so again, it's an approach that often works. It's another one that you keep in your arsenal. There are times when you want to be able to compromise. And then the final style, of course, is the collaborative or problem-solving approach, which I think is called something different in your book. Anybody remember? Yeah, that's the term. Yeah. There may even be others. I don't know. But there are, again, multiple terms here. But the point, once again, is when you're looking out for your own needs and interests, but also the needs and interests of the other party. Not surprisingly, the book refers to this as the only win-win style, right? Both parties get their needs and interests at least examined, if not hopefully met, when you come to a collaborative solution. Both sides end up being more committed is another important advantage, right? When you reach a collaborative solution, and of course so often we want people to be committed to whatever solution we come up with. There aren't too many downsides to collaborating. I mean, there are some that can be time consuming, but really there's not too much in the way of downsides. And of course, there are times when you want to make sure that you're collaborating. We sort of say in general you want to try to collaborate in the workplace, but it's especially important in certain situations. And for example, where both parties feel very passionate. Someone said that for another approach, but both sides feel very strongly and passionately about something. It's important to collaborate when both sets of needs are very important to people. When commitment is necessary, when you've got the time, it'll sort of all be elements of when you want to make sure that you're collaborating. And And so that's the final style, and hopefully at least some of you have done many. If you test it out as being collaborators, it really is the approach that most of us should try to use most of the time. And if you test it out that way, so much the better. If you didn't, it's worth thinking about trying to collaborate and problem solve more often in business. But again, please remember that although the book advocates, and I would certainly advocate being a collaborator in general, you've got to be able to use all 5 styles. That's one of the sort of the takeaway points I want to leave us with on this slide, is to realize that effective conflict handlers don't just have one style. But you've got to be able to use all 5 of them depending on the situation. There are some situations that call for avoiding, some for accommodating, some for compromising, some for collaborating, some for forcing. And you need to be able to use all 5 of them to fit whatever situation you find yourself in. One other point I want to make before we leave this slide, though, is to point out that most styles don't work very well together. Can you guys think of some examples of combinations that are especially poisonous, just really aren't going to work well?
Forcing and avoiding.
Okay, forcing and avoiding. What do you think? Can you pursue that a little bit?
Well, if you always have someone that is this is the way it's always going to be, and the person who's avoiding can just can't stand up to that person, it's always going to be a certain way with it.
Yeah.
Violent.
Yeah, good, right? And so actually, both of those are kind of true for, forces with anybody. That becomes an issue, right? That people are going to feel stepped on, right, by a forcer. And with avoiders tend to be frustrating to everybody else because they're just not dealing with anything. So yeah, you put them together, that can maybe be an especially bad comment. Can you think of any others that would work really for you together? I'm going to ask that almost rhetorically, because I think the more you look at it, the more you're going to say almost every style doesn't work very well together, right? Does anybody want to just make any comment, Lindsay?
Well, I would think avoidance would work very well.
Okay, yeah, you can imagine avoiders together, we just never deal with conflict effectively, or even avoiders and accommodators together, right? Is there a good answer? Okay, yeah. All right, yeah, almost everyone's frustrated with a collaborator because they're looking out for everyone's needs or interests, and so if an accommodator is only given in, that doesn't work well. Yeah, so again, if you guys take a look across this, almost every combination ends up being kind of bad together. The only major exception, of course, is 2 collaborators. That's one of the major reasons why we encourage everybody to work on their good collaborative skills, is that that's the only kind of long-term approach that really works well together. Some of the others might work pretty well over the short term. Having a couple of avoiders can work okay over the short term, maybe, but over the long term, you can be a disaster. But compromisers would be the other approach that works okay, at least over the long term. People sort of consistently compromising and often be relatively effective and get along. We're going to be doing an exercise later on that will try to make the point that although that may seem like that's a great thing, to be compromising all the time and to be in a relationship with other compromisers, that although there's some truth to that, right, that can work okay, the results you're going to get are going to be suboptimal, right, compared to if you had actually taken the time to try to collaborate. So if you are a compromiser and you've never thought about that, I'll try to make that point more clearly. That may be okay, but you can get better results usually if you try to collaborate. Again, stay tuned for that. Okay. Anyway, I hope that's useful and worth expanding on your book's treatment of that. In terms of guidelines for effective conflict resolution, we can go through these. This is adding to your list, by the way, of good communication tips. This is in the context of conflict, but these are important communication tips in general. The first category you find in this literature so commonly is just to basically work on your ability to consider the other person. Right? We mentioned this in terms of empathy, empathetic communication previously in the class in communication, but even more important during conflict. Because in conflict, again, emotions tend to be bubbling up, especially negative feelings, and it becomes that much easier to just focus on yourself, right, and not look out for the other party's needs and interests. Of course, this is particularly true for the enforcer, avoider to some degree. But the more you can do to walk in the other person's shoes, so to speak, to listen actively, as we talked about, to try to avoid blaming. Blaming is so easy to do in conflict that it's not constructive. The general principle, once someone feels blamed in a conflict, the chances of resolving the conflict effectively just plummet after blaming occurs. So try not to engage in blame behavior. That's part of consideration of the other person. Try to help the other party save face instead of just looking to dominate and win every single conflict you find yourself involved in. To realize that, again, often relationships matter, whether it's life or business. Trying to help people save face is another part of consideration of the other individual. So, some good things to think about and to work on as we try to get better at resolving conflict in our own lives. Depersonalizing criticism is another useful tip. I think I've gotten some mileage from in my own life and career. The idea here is that, again, these are only guidelines. There are always going to be exceptions. But the guideline is to try to, when you're criticizing somebody, engaging in negative criticism, try to use I and we language instead of the more accusatory you language. This, by the way, is a tip I could have easily given you in feedback giving. We're kind of discussing it here, but same kind of idea. So you can imagine, for example, I'm giving somebody feedback. You know, I've got a worker of mine who's not performing well. I can say things like, you know, you blew it, you screwed up, you know, you better get this fixed or you're going to get fired. Right? A lot of use of the word you. I can have that same conversation, right? Kind of taking the word you out of it to deliver basically the same message to that employee in a much less accusatory and damaging way. So I can say, look, obviously, you know, we have a problem here. You know, let's figure out, you know, what's going on here and work together so that we don't have to face the situation again in the future. I'm kind of making that up. That's not a very direct form of communication. But you guys get the idea. Is that the more you tend, when you give negative feedback, the more you use the word you tend to get in the way of good communication. You can typically give a very similar kind of message in a way that's much more inclusive. It shows that you're taking maybe some responsibility and ownership for what's happening. Now, again, don't get me wrong here. There are lots of times when you're managing when you really don't deserve any responsibility or ownership for what is going wrong with your subordinate in terms of his or her performance. I think if most of us are honest with ourselves as managers, we say to ourselves, you know, there's probably something I could have done better with that employee, some help, some support I could have given, some training, some more time, something I could have done to help that person. And by just even taking just a tiny bit of responsibility and ownership for what's going on, it has a very important and beneficial impact on your employee and on the relationship. It tends to promote a lot more cooperation and understanding, and ultimately dramatically increasing, I think, the likelihood of a good, successful conversation, where you walk away with some good ideas for the future, some constructive thoughts about where to go, instead of your employee walking away feeling, you know, demoralized, feeling, you know, accused, feeling put down. You know, we talk about defensiveness and disconfirmation getting in the way of good communication. So just even a little bit of use of I and we as opposed to the more accusatory you language. We call that depersonalizing criticism. It can often go a long way toward having a more constructive feedback during the conversation. And then again, of course, useful in the context of conflict. The more sort of accusation the person feels like they're making during conflict handling, well, that's less likely that you're going to resolve the conflict effectively. Some other tips you find in this literature area to resolve conflict. Try to focus on interests and not positions. Sometimes people get very stuck on interests. It often looks like things like, get stuck on positions. Like, I'm saying yes and you're saying no. Right? If we get into a conflict where I'm standing to yes and you're standing on no, we're not going to get very far, right? Yes and no are diametrically opposed positions. You're not going to get far that way. So instead of getting stuck on yes versus no, let's talk about what we really need and want out of the situation. Okay? Instead of just saying yes versus no, what are you looking for? What am I looking for? Let's get to the level of interest. And often you can do a much more effective job of resolving conflict if you get to the level of what people really need and want, as opposed to getting stuck on yes versus no or A versus not A. And a lot of times conflict does get stuck on position. Try to get below those to what people really need and want. Generating multiple options is another conflict handling tip. This gets into the idea of creativity, which we're going to read about and talk a little bit more about later in class. But maybe not surprisingly, when conflict bubbles up, many of us sort of lose our ability to be creative. You know, we get very stuck on a very narrow way of looking at things, not examining multiple options or ways of looking at things. So trying to do what you can to, you know, have a little red flag that goes up and says, hey, you know, this is conflict. Let's try to look at things differently. Try to maintain some creativity. so much the better. Try to find a larger goal. You know, you find this in international negotiations, you know, where two countries are very stuck on positions maybe and not getting very far. Maybe both countries can try to, resolve some kind of impasse by saying, is there something larger that we can both countries can agree on that can allow us to move forward? Maybe we can't agree on lots of issues, but maybe we can agree on the principle of peace. That we don't want to go to war over it. And trying to find some larger idea that both sides can agree to can often be useful in resolving conflict. And then we've already talked about using this right style in the situation. Right? So these are all just tips that you tend to find in this literature area. I'm sure we're going to hear more, by the way, in one of our workshops coming up. So I don't want to say a whole lot more, except just to say, please make sure that you find time to read your chapter. There's a lot of good information in your conflict chapter to go along with what we've talked about here in class. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left, which is perfect. I'd like to do an exercise, if we can, to finish off class. So please find a partner, just one other person to do this exercise.
Hi, partner. You want to do That was difficult.
Sorry, Henry. I love you, but
Okay. Does everyone have a partner? Do we have an even number of people in this room? I think we do. Everyone has a partner? All right. I'm going to go ahead and hand back this sheet first. One person out of your group of two, one person gets this sheet, and only one person. So just someone take that sheet and then pass it back. It doesn't matter who gets it. Someone takes the sheet and then pass it back. The other person gets this sheet. Okay, so this next one coming back, the other one gets. Please do not show this sheet to the other person. Whatever you're getting, don't show your sheet to your partner.
Eric, you're out of line.
All right, time is a little bit short, so I'm going to go ahead and just explain this to you verbally. I can have you read it, but I think I can explain it even quicker probably verbally. But first of all, before you start to get into this, let me just make sure everybody has a sheet. And also, please double check with your partner. One sheet will say instructions for buyers, the other one says instructions for sellers. Please be sure one person has a buyer sheet, the other one has a seller sheet. This is not going to work if you have the same sheet.
And the sellers.
There should be lots of extras.
There's buyers.
There should be lots of extras.
Sellers.
seller. Do you have a buyer?
Sellers.
Instructions for sellers or instructions for buyers. Please double check with your partner.
Why don't you just call me? Let's take this up to Cheryl. Huh?
Will.
Okay? One buyer, one seller.
I'm a salesman.
Was that extra?
Is it from that one?
Let's pick it up.
Okay.
Okay. Ed, are we okay? Do you have a partner? You okay? You have no partner. So we have an odd number of people in here. Does everyone else have a partner? Yeah. I think we have an odd number. Thank you. I was like, okay. There we go. And then can you just again double check and make sure that you've got those four sheets? You have a buyer. So here's your seller sheet. Okay, thank you. All right, what you're going to be doing here is a negotiation. I don't want to do a ton on this because I know we're going to be doing some of this in a workshop, but I wanted to do at least one negotiation exercise to go along with our material on conflict handling. What you're going to be doing simply is negotiating with the other person with regard to those three commodities. You see a table on your sheet that gives you your profit schedule for iron, sulfur, and coal. Please don't get hung up on whether you're a buyer or a seller. It doesn't really matter. Buyers and sellers both have profit schedules. And so these numbers, as you negotiate them, will tell you how much profit you're making from the exercise. So just try to make the highest number possible, whether you're a buyer or a seller. You're going for a high number. Okay? And the way that you do this, though, is that, like any negotiation, you would not divulge your profit information to your person you're negotiating with. So keep this information to yourself. And in fact, please do not divulge any numbers at all. The way I'd like you to negotiate is in letters. As you can see on your table, each number has got a letter associated with it. And so the first person might say, for example, okay, let's agree on C for iron, E for sulfur, and H for coal. All right? If that works for the other person, you're done. If the other person is not okay with that, they'll come back with another 3-letter combination. Right now, how about G for iron, D for sulfur, A for coal, or whatever, right? So the point is to go back and forth until both of you can agree on a 3-letter combination that represents your agreement. I'm going to put a time constraint on this of 7 minutes. So when the clock gets to 10 after, you'll be out of time and your profit will be 0. So you got to come to an agreement in the next 7 minutes. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck. All right.
This comes up exactly. That's kind of funny. So, Dave, here's what I need you to do. I need you to picture yourself buying 3 commodities, okay? Now, these 3 commodities, I mean, they're not just these 3 minerals out there. These are really the future of your business. And, you know, knowing that, if you're not interested in them, I'm just going to have to take my business elsewhere. So, what kind of price are we talking for these? Are we looking like high across the board, or?
Or are they the exact same numbers or no?
I don't think so, no.
Eyes are low.
What's that?
Eyes are low.
So we all agree eyes then, all the way across, right?
Right.
No, what do you mean no?
Okay, so they're all ordered. And then that's price for all 3. Do not reveal profit information. Okay. So you don't. So your letters are different.
Yes.
Are your letters jumbled?
No. The letters are jumbled on yours? No.
I'm just trying to understand how strategizing is. Okay. I'll buy. How about a E for iron?
E for iron.
Which is the
If you're going to do E for iron, then we got to talk coal, because that one's important. I need slightly higher on coal, like an F or a G. I'll move on sulfur and iron, but coal. In fact, I'll even give you an F on iron for an F on coal.
If you're done, you're welcome to add it up. You can
Whatever
always
I want. Alright, so F on coal. Okay.
Let's do it. And how about sulfur? Where do you need to be on sulfur?
I hear you actually some money.
Middle high.
You know, I'm tempted just to cut that from the middle and D.
Alright. I'll give you that.
How about if you want to vote?
An F? I'll give you an F on the sulfur, but then we got to drop back down to an E on the iron.
Wait, why do we want to go down? Don't I want to go up? You want to go down?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Are eyes better for you?
Well, I don't understand. So I'm buying. Okay. I shouldn't have been on price. So how about E on iron, D on sulfur, F on sulfur?
Pleasure doing business with you, sir.
We're down to about 3 minutes to
If you sold B, your profits would be $10.
Except she is business might be a better.
If you sold the price A, your profits would be $1,000. Sold B, Oh, so you want the high letters. And by the low letters,
It's been a pleasure doing business with you.
wait, but we pick middle letters, right?
What's that? No, that's it, I think.
Is that bad? Oh, no.
I think we both did just fine.
Down to about 2 minutes.
Ooh, I moved pretty far.
Done, you can go ahead and add them.
Want to add them up? What was E for you? 1,000. D?
750.
Sorry. I think you whooped my butt. I still think you would my sub be 1,000, 2,050. And that would be, I can't do that much.
It's 850, 900, 900 plus
2,100 even? But we still did pretty good though. I mean, that's $50. I'll take that.
So they,
I think we're all done. Can I just ask, anyone need more time?
okay.
Okay, time is a little bit short. We only have about 5 minutes left in class, so I want to just discuss this briefly. I would like to know your 3-letter solution and how much the buyer made and how much the seller made. Okay. So if someone already knows that, can you hike up your hand and start recording this? Buyer was 2650. Seller? Okay.
No, we're telling him what we worked out.
We're still at it. Okay.
Ours was CFF.
Yeah. Buyer?
2350.
2350. 2250. Seller?
Same.
Same.
No, I'm sorry. 2,200.
That makes a difference. Okay, well. Okay, buyer? 2,600, seller? 23, thank you. Sorry. Don't hear any with it. Go ahead.
EGG.
Buyer?
1,500.
Seller?
800.
Okay, who else? Which one are you? Buyer?
I'm very good at your sharing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Wait, I can't buy it.
Found out the profit margins.
Seller?
That's not even very good. That's not even
I get it. If you went A, I, we both went A. No, you wouldn't be there. I'm sure there's a way you can break it down and it comes out in the numbers.
Oh, there it is. See.
How does that work?
CFF? Buyer?
Yeah, seller's been paid 400.
Bless you.
Thanks.
EDF.
EDF.
Affordable combination.
Buyer?
Perfect. 2050,
2050. Seller?
2100.
2100. Others?
For sure, got 2200.
Did you get the 22?
2200.
Really? That's like 100 higher than what I got.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. How do you feel about picking on them like that?
She actually benefits.
Oh, did you get more? It's a good cooperative relationship you have. Synergy. Synergy.
We got I.
It's a quick negotiation.
I.
No way.
I got 0.
Seller?
So I got 4,000, I guess.
Wow.
4,800.
Okay, I just have your attention just real quick. I want to just mention a couple things about this. Again,
Yeah, 4,800.
more on these kinds of issues from a workshop.
No, I'm
here
not.
on
I'm
class.
sorry.
One thing to point out quickly is that everyone had the same information coming in here, the same sheets, but we see that everybody actually got a different combination, which suggests that your behavior matters when you're engaging in negotiation, right? Everybody walks in with the same thing, but everybody got a different result. It does suggest the importance of learning good negotiation skills, because your behaviors, your thoughts, what you do during a negotiation can dramatically, in some cases, impact what you walk away with. Right? So even though this is not a class on negotiation, I would be happy to, and you guys on your own can find, other resources on good negotiation skills. The second point I want to make is to note that we got finished just talking about conflict handling styles a few minutes ago. It's possible, if not likely, that your conflict handling style came out during this exercise, especially if you ended up, kind of lopsided in your favor, maybe suggestive of your forcing approach. If you ended up being lopsided against you, or it could be indicative of avoiding or accommodating. If you found a solution kind of close to EDE, which would be the straight compromise here, where you kind of split everything in half, maybe it's indicative of your compromising style. It just gets back to the point we were making earlier, is that you want to use your right style to fit the situation. And maybe if this is just your dominant conflict handling style coming out like every other situation, you need to realize that and to have that mental flag go up in the future that says, okay, here's a conflict, I got to use the right style. I can't just always accommodate like I always do, always force, always do whatever, because it might not be the best approach to this particular situation. By the way, as we said, the compromising style here would be EDE, which I think pays 2,100 for both. But if you would come up with AEI, which no one did, that's the collaborating approach that comes away with 2,600 for both parties. The optimal solution for both parties involved. The way that you might have come up with the AEI solution would be for both people to take the maximum of the quantity of the commodity that was most important to you, and then you split the little third one down the middle. Is arguably again the collaborative approach. Once again, I told you guys I would make a point about this. Please realize that if you are a compromiser and you think that it's always okay or good to compromise, you would have only walked away with 2,100 out of this exercise. But if you had found a way to truly collaborate and find what's best for both parties, most people walk away with 2,600.
Couldn't do that.
And as I said, it's a point I wanted to make to speak to the compromisers in here. It is usually worth it to spend the extra time trying to collaborate, and don't just always split everything down the middle. Okay, that's pretty much good. We're about a minute or two after class anyway. But last point would simply be: how often do you know the outcome of your negotiation? So if you are somebody that maybe do so.